Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Spider's Web, a police procedural novel, by Mike Omer, narrated by Eric Martin. Chapter 1. When Kendall selected the songs for her jogging playlist, she didn't pause to think, what if I die hearing this? It wasn't a question that normally occurred to her, though perhaps on that day it should have. She thought Taylor Swift's Shake It Off would be a fun song to jog with. It played as she ran through the park toward a thick cluster of trees. The park was mostly empty this early in the morning. Thin mist hovered above the grass, covering the ground in a forlorn gray blanket. A long, paved path circled the park, twisting around Buttermere Pond, and then led into a small grove. This was the path Kendall now followed on her early morning jog, listening to Taylor Swift, thinking about her growing clientele and income. By the time she reached the artificial pond in the middle of the park, she had broken a sweat. The chilly morning breeze was pleasantly cool on her skin. She watched the calm, dark water as she ran, noticing the way the trees reflected in it, warped into strange shapes. She was cautiously happy. Kendall treated happiness like a toddler learning to walk. She approached it gently, taking careful, tentative steps. She didn't want to rush into happiness. That was how you got hurt. She didn't want to get hurt again. What she loved most about her new life was the complete control. She had control over herself, over her financial situation, over her schedule. She had complete control over the people in her life. She kept those to a bare minimum. She rounded a corner, following the path as it moved closer to the pond, when something exploded against her right temple. Her vision darkened for a moment, and then she could see again. Everything seemed fuzzy. She was on her knees, one hand on the ground and one hand against her head, trying to understand what had just happened. Taylor Swift was singing about haters. Someone grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. She screamed as he pulled her to her feet. She tried to look backwards, but turning her head was hard, and the world was an unfocused blur. Her attacker shoved her forward, and she stumbled, nearly fell, the person behind her holding her up by her twisted arm. It felt as if he was about to rip it out of its socket. She cried in pain, begged him to stop, whoever it was. She tried to make sense of things. Who was it? What did he want from her? She realized where he was taking her, and she struggled, trying to twist away. Something, a rough hand, smacked her on the back of her head. She knew it was a hand. She knew how it felt being beaten. But it wasn't supposed to happen anymore. Not here. 2 more steps, and she felt the cold against her legs. Her attacker forced her into the pond, the water's surface a blurry thing, sparkling in the early sun. Her eyesight slowly focused, and she realized that, in the background, Taylor Swift was still singing, telling her to shake it off. And then another sharp pain. Her arm twisted even higher. She screamed again, tears filling her eyes. She was forced to bend forward, stumbling to her knees, the water lapping against her, drenching her shorts. She babbled, pleading. She didn't know what was happening, couldn't see her attacker, who never let up, pulling harder and harder, and she felt dizzy, nauseated, about to faint. And then everything was cold. She inhaled in shock, and her mouth and throat filled with water. A hand held her head under. She panicked, twisting, not caring about the pain in her arm anymore, just trying to breathe. Spots danced around her field of view as it darkened, the muddy waters swirling cloud patterns growing dimmer. The hand was relentless, crushing her head against the pond's sandy bottom, wet sand clogging her nose, brushing against her teeth, and still the music played. It was getting dark, her mind foggy, and her lungs exploding with pain. She had just one reflex left, telling her she had to break through, screaming that she had to get away, had to breathe. But she was weak and helpless, and she couldn't. Detective Mitchell Lonnie walked down the paved path that snaked through the park, approaching the crime scene. The rain pattered around him, a light drizzle, but enough to make him regret his decision to leave the umbrella at home. He hunched his shoulders and pulled the collar of his jacket closer as the raindrops crawled down his neck. The sky was gray, matching his mood as he thought of Pauline's face when he told her that he'd gotten a call that they would have to cancel their plans for lunch. She'd had that spark in her eyes, the kind she had when she knew she shouldn't be angry, but was anyway. They hardly had any time together lately, and though people could be murdered any time, she would have appreciated it if they wouldn't do so on a weekend. Candace, the dispatcher, had told him on the phone that a body had been found buried near Buttermere Pond. He could see the crime scene now. Several people were already there, near the path by the grove of trees. He'd already seen his partner's car parked in the parking lot next to the patrol car that had originally been dispatched to the scene. It was a good thing it was raining. On a sunny August weekend, the park would have been full of people, and they'd have had to handle the gaggle of onlookers that would invariably flock to the scene. As things stood, the park was empty, and the scene held only 6 people, and he recognized almost all of them. He stopped for a moment, trying to take in the entire scene. Kate and Noel, the patrol officers, were talking to a young, scared-looking Hispanic teenager. He wore a yellow raincoat and a backpack, and clutched the leash of a wet golden retriever. The 2 crime scene investigators, Matt Lowry and Violet Todd, were hunched by a shallow hole. Matt dug carefully with a small shovel, while Violet took pictures with a small camera. Next to them stood Mitchell's partner, Detective Jacob Cooper, wearing his iconic fedora over his completely bald head and holding a black umbrella. He was a wide-shouldered man, his presence authoritative and imposing. His eyes were icy blue, always alert, and missed nothing. He'd spent the last 25 years on the force, and was one of the sharpest detectives ever to work for the Glenmore Park Detective Squad. Mitchell approached Jacob, who shook his hand. "What do we have?" Mitchell asked. "The kid's dog found the body," Jacob said, indicating the teenager. "It was buried about 2 feet deep. He called us as soon as he realized what it was." "He just happened to be walking in the park on a rainy day?" Mitchell asked. Jacob shrugged. "I haven't talked to him yet," he said. Mitchell approached the grave. It was only partially uncovered, with the body's feet and head visible, and the rest of the body still buried. Matt, his dark-skinned neck glistening in the rain, slowly scratched away the soil, careful not to disrupt the evidence in any way. Kneeling, he looked even shorter than usual. Matt was one of the shortest people Mitchell knew, and his surname, Lowery, had probably caused him infinite grief over the years. The air was rank with the smell of rot and death, and Mitchell found himself taking quick, short breaths through his mouth. The body was far from fresh. The blackened, glistening skin made Mitchell's stomach turn. It was, as far as he could tell, a woman, her eyes and tongue protruding gruesomely. Her hair was partially detached from her scalp. He took a step back, an involuntary gasp escaping his mouth. "Watch your step," Matt said, without turning around. Mitchell looked at the ground by his feet. A splash of yellow sludge was only inches from his left foot. "What is that?" he asked in a muffled voice, holding his wet shirt to his mouth and nose. "A partially digested breakfast, contributed by the kid who found the body," Matt answered. Vomit. Stood to reason. A few feet from the puddle of vomit was another splash. "That one as well?" Mitchell asked, pointing. "That one belongs to Noel," Matt said. "Right," Mitchell said, and considered adding his own contribution to the lot. His empty stomach was rebelling against the whole thing. There was a pile of evidence bags by Matt's feet, most holding dirt. Next to them were several containers in which Mitchell spotted some insects crawling. "How long do you think you'll be here?" Mitchell asked. "Well," Matt said, "I'll uncover the body and take some additional insect and soil samples. I'll scan the surrounding area, but I wouldn't hold my breath for any evidence I find here. Hundreds of people walk here every day, and this isn't a fresh crime." "Any idea how long ago?" Mitchell asked. "Just an approximation?" "No," Matt said shortly. "Yeah, okay," Mitchell said. He walked away to join Jacob, who was approaching Noel and the teenager. Noel nodded at Mitchell and Jacob, his eyes serious. Mitchell liked Noel. He was a solid cop, and never showed any of the resentment some of the other patrol cops displayed toward detectives. "I'm Detective Jacob Cooper," Jacob told the kid. "This is my partner, Detective Mitchell Lonnie. What's your name?" Daniel Hernandez," the kid said. His light brown face was wet from the rain, his black hair flat on his head. His eyes were a bit red, and Mitchell suspected he had cried earlier. His golden retriever sat on the ground glumly, its head on its front paws, its fur a soggy mess. "Can you please tell us how you found this body?" "It was my dog that found it," Daniel said. "Not me." "Did you pick up anything or touch anything before or after you found the body?" Jacob asked, narrowing his eyes. "No. I mean, maybe I touched some things, but not the body, I think. I might have touched it once, accidentally. I'm sorry." The boy began sobbing again, his eyes on the ground. Mitchell knelt by the boy and touched his arm gently. Daniel lifted his gaze and met Mitchell's compassionate stare. Mitchell saw the boy's shoulders sag as he relaxed a bit, identifying a perceived friend. It was a cheap trick. Both detectives knew well that people reflexively liked Mitchell. Jacob would establish the role of the hard, no-nonsense detective, and then Mitchell would swoop in and earn their trust, though probably in this case it was hardly needed. This was just a kid who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Don't worry, Daniel," Mitchell said, his voice soft. "You did nothing wrong." Daniel nodded, sniffling. "How did your dog find the body?" Mitchell asked. "She's like a stench magnet. If there's anything rotting or stinking within a mile, she immediately homes in on it. She likes to roll in dead animals." "I see," Mitchell said, queasy at the thought. "So she smelled it?" "I guess," Daniel said, looking at the dog in irritation. "She pulled me over there and started digging. I let her dig. I was just messaging with my girl, so I didn't really mind stopping for a bit. But then I noticed something in the ground. It was the head. I called the police right away." "Do you live nearby, Daniel?" Mitchell asked. "Yeah. I mean, about 15 minutes from the park." "Do you often come here to walk your dog?" "Sometimes, on weekends," Daniel said, shrugging. "Even when it rains?" "Dog's got to do what a dog's got to do." "Okay, so you found the body and called us. What did you do then?" "Nothing. I just waited. Cops got here about 20 minutes later." "Did you see anything unusual while you were waiting?" "No." "Did anyone go by?" "No." "Okay, thanks, Daniel." "Can I go?" "Sure," Jacob said. "Just give us your details so we can contact you if we need anything." Daniel gave them his address and phone number and turned to leave. "Hang on," Mitchell said. "What?" "Give me your phone for a second, Daniel." "Why?" "Just do it." Glumly, Daniel handed Mitchell the phone. Mitchell opened the picture gallery and looked at the most recent pictures. He sighed. The last 3 images were selfies that Daniel had taken, the head of the uncovered body prominent in the background. Mitchell showed the images to Jacob, who shook his head. "Daniel, a selfie with a dead body? Seriously?" Jacob said. "I was just gonna—" "No," Mitchell said. "You weren't." He deleted the images. "Did you share these images?" Jacob asked. "No." "Are you sure? We'll check." "No, I didn't share them with anyone." "Okay." Mitchell handed the phone back to Daniel. "Look," Daniel said, "can I take a selfie with one of you then? I just want something to show my friends." "Sure," Jacob said. "Take a picture with Detective Lonnie." Mitchell sent Jacob a scathing look, but Daniel was already happily edging next to Mitchell, tapping his phone. He slung his arm around Mitchell's neck as if they were long-lost friends and took some photos, all the while trying to make Mitchell act a bit more detective-y. Finally, to Mitchell's relief, Daniel left, the dog plodding after him. Mitchell approached Violet, who was pacing around the scene now, examining the ground carefully. "Found anything interesting yet?" he asked. "A used condom," she said, raising her eyes to meet his, "and 2 beer bottles." Mitchell made a mental note of the condom and wondered briefly if this was a sex crime. He turned around and looked at the grave again. Matt still knelt next to it, his face grim, patiently scraping the dirt off the body. He turned toward Jacob. "Strange place to hide a body," he said. "Yeah," Jacob said. "This area is usually full of people." He stared into the distance, and Mitchell followed his eyes. 3 figures drew nearer, 2 men carrying a stretcher and a woman by their side. "Assuming the killer came here with the body," Mitchell said, "he'd have to carry it all the way over to the grove, dig a hole in the ground, dump it, and cover it without anyone noticing." "And why would he even do that?" Jacob answered. "There are a million better places and ways to get rid of a body." The 3 figures were close now. Mitchell recognized Annie Turner, her red hair completely soaked. "Hello, detectives," Annie said as she reached them. Annie was Glenmore Park's medical examiner. She was easy to work with and did her best to explain any medical findings until even the thickest of detectives could follow what she said. She wore a yellow raincoat over her white pants and shirt. The square eyeglasses she always wore were spattered with raindrops, and Mitchell wondered if she could really see anything through them. He showed her the way to the grave. Matt had removed most of the soil from the body's torso. Tatters of what had probably once been a sports bra covered very little of the woman's decaying flesh. Despite his 9 years on the force, Mitchell found the sight distressing and averted his eyes, looking at Annie instead. She approached the grave hesitantly, her steps small and careful. Hello, Matt," she said. Matt cleared his throat. "Hello, Annie," he said. Annie crouched next to the body and looked at it intently. "I see you already bagged her hands," she said softly. "Well, yes," Matt said. "Do you want me to wait for you next time? I can definitely do that. You're right, I should have waited." No, it's okay. No need to wait. You did what you were supposed to." Annie's voice became a bit choked. Mitchell stared at them both, his eyebrows raised. It was like watching 2 teenagers try to gather the courage to ask each other to the prom what was up with them. "You didn't have to come," Matt said. "I mean, it's not like you had to pronounce the death here, right? You're just getting wet." "No, it's okay. I wanted to see the body." Annie bent to touch one of the body's hands just as Matt cleaned some dirt off it. Their fingers touched, and they both withdrew quickly. "I'll be done in a minute," Matt blurted. Right. Annie stood up and turned to the 2 men who accompanied her. "Let's open the stretcher," she said. "Matt will be done soon." Mitchell circled the grave, then turned to Jacob once more. "Looks like she was wearing running clothes," he said. "So she was probably jogging," Jacob said. "Probably. She went jogging in the park, and the killer waited for her here. I'm guessing it was very early in the morning or late in the evening," Mitchell said. "There weren't many people in the park." "And after she was killed, he buried her in the same spot," Jacob said. "Right." They stayed on the scene while Annie collected the body, placing it in a black body bag. Matt bagged a car key found in the body's back pocket and gathered some additional samples. The 2 detectives and 2 crime scene technicians canvassed the crime scene. In addition to the beer bottles and the condom, they found an old dry pen, a cigarette stub, and a candy bar wrap, all within 50 feet of the grave. There was no ID on the body. There was no reason to rush the investigation. The crime wasn't fresh. Annie had quickly determined it was committed at least a week before, and there was no easy way to identify the body, no family to notify. In short, there was no excuse for paid overtime. The chief was quick to inform Captain Bailey that his squad could wait and start working the case on Monday. Unsurprisingly, no one argued. What was left of the weekend passed uneventfully. Though they had seen the dead, buried, decaying body, the detectives and the crime scene crew refused to let the incident mar their weekend plans. But death can trickle in during quiet, thoughtful moments. It doesn't ask for permission, often sneaking into people's minds before they notice it is there. During Saturday dinner, Jacob's daughter Amy asked him to pass the salad bowl. She repeated the request 3 times. Each time her father stared through her, as if she had turned invisible. Finally, he cleared his throat and passed over the salt shaker. Amy exchanged a look with Marissa, Jacob's wife. The rest of the dinner was a silent affair. Matt was driving down the highway when a huge surge of loneliness hit him. He got off at the next exit and stopped at the side of the road, tears springing from his eyes. He took out his phone and thought about calling someone. He scrolled down the contact list, seeing only one name he really wanted to call. But he didn't. Instead, he opened Twitter, tried to think of something witty or thoughtful to say, found nothing, and eventually retweeted a tweet from the oatmeal. For some reason, this made him feel better, and he got back on the road. Mitchell and Pauline were kissing, naked in bed. Pauline's hand snaked along the back of his leg, her fingers lightly touching his thigh, and suddenly he moved away. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," he said, unable to explain that her body suddenly reminded him of the dead body he had seen earlier, the remnants of the sports bra failing to cover the girl's decomposing flesh. He kissed her lightly on the lips, and she smiled, her eyes concerned. She fell asleep with Mitchell hugging her from behind, listening intently to her deep breaths, wondering if the dead girl had someone who missed her body, her warmth, her love. Annie, who had seen more death than any of the others, was mostly undisturbed. But there was a moment, just a tiny moment while she was in the shower, that a flashing memory of the girl's face invaded her thoughts. She brushed it aside, got out of the shower, dressed, and went to see a movie. On Monday morning, she autopsied the dead woman's body. She did it by herself, preferring the solitude. She didn't like using assistants for murder autopsies, though she couldn't say why. Once she was done, she called Jacob and informed him that she had some conclusions she wanted to share. Chapter 2. To avoid any embarrassing moments in the morgue, Mitchell decided to smear some vapor-rub under his nostrils to mask the body's smell. As he stood by the metal gurney on which their Jane Doe lay, it occurred to him that vapor-rub was supposed to open up his nasal passageways even more, and that it might not have been the best idea he ever had. The smell was overpowering, and his stomach turned. He tried to push the feeling away and pay attention to what Annie was telling him and Jacob. She gestured at the body as she talked, the harsh white light in the morgue emphasizing the corpse's discolored skin. "The deceased was 21 years old," Annie said. "She was Caucasian, 5'7", red hair. It's difficult to determine exact weight, but she was quite thin. I can't really give you an accurate time of death yet. The ground at the burial site was moist, and summer temperatures fluctuate wildly. However, Matt extracted several larvae from her cavities and from the surrounding dirt, and we're consulting a forensic entomologist this afternoon. I think we'll be able to give you an approximate time of death this evening." "Okay," Jacob said. "The stomach and intestines were already liquefied when we uncovered the body, so I can't really tell you anything about their contents. However, I did find some interesting samples in the body's sinuses." She walked over to a shelf which held several jars and picked one of them up to show them. "What is it?" Mitchell asked, squinting at the small patch of black matter. "It's some sort of vegetation," Annie said. "She inhaled it?" Jacob asked. "So it appears," Annie said. "This could have happened for several reasons, but one of the most likely possibilities is drowning. Victims of drowning sometimes inhale aquatic vegetation when they are trying to breathe. She also had some sand particles in her mouth that didn't match the soil she was buried in, which I collected in the jar over there. She indicated a different container. But that doesn't tell us much, since she would have inhaled the particles if she was running during a windy day with some dust in the air. I also checked her bone marrow and found some diatoms there. "What's that?" Mitchell asked. "I'm getting there," Annie said testily. Diatoms are one-celled phytoplankton that sometimes live in water. When people drown, they inhale these organisms, which later collect in the bone marrow. "But wouldn't a drowning victim have water in her lungs?" Mitchell asked. "Not necessarily," Annie said. "About 15% of drowning cases are dry drownings, which leave the lungs completely dry." "So she drowned?" Jacob asked. "Well," Annie hesitated. "The diatom test is not exactly conclusive, but it does indicate a likely possibility of drowning. Couple that with the plant I found in her sinuses, and we have high likelihood for drowning." "How high?" Annie shrugged. "Could the vegetation and the dust have come from the pond water in the park?" "Absolutely," Annie said. "Can you check if they match?" "I think so. I'll contact an expert I know." "Okay," Jacob said. "A 21-year-old female who probably died from drowning. What else do you have for us?" "I sent DNA samples to the lab to check in CODIS," Annie said. "Unfortunately, I couldn't recover any fingerprints. I did find a root canal, which seems to be quite old, probably from childhood. If we do have a suspicion for a match, we can check against dental records." Jacob and Mitchell both nodded. This was helpful, though they had hoped for more. "Anything else?" Mitchell asked. "I think she was abused as a child," Annie said. "What makes you say that?" Jacob asked. "See here," Annie said, and walked toward one of the walls where some X-ray images hung. 2 old fractures on the 3rd left rib, and 1 additional fracture on the 4th. Her left hand was broken twice, and there were several fractures in the fingers as well." "Maybe she was involved in some sort of accident," Mitchell suggested. Annie shook her head. "The fractures occurred at different times. No, this was a case of someone who for some reason got her bones broken over and over. I see this sometimes with people who do extreme sports, but these are really old fractures, so she had to be about 10 or 11 when some of them occurred, and this makes me doubt the extreme sports theory." "Okay," Jacob nodded. "Is there a way to know if she was sexually assaulted before she was killed?" Mitchell asked. Annie shook her head. "No way to know for sure, but I didn't find any traces to indicate she was, and her shorts and underwear were mostly intact." "Okay," Jacob nodded. "Thanks, Annie." So far, their Jane Doe remained anonymous. As soon as they returned to the squad room, Mitchell made his way to the filing cabinet. He was not interested in anything inside. These days, almost all their files could be accessed digitally. But the file cabinet held the important position of pedestal for the coffee maker. He made a pot of strong black coffee and poured 2 cups, handing one to Jacob, who was already typing furiously on his keyboard. The coffee maker, a ridiculously expensive model bought a year before by Captain Fred Bailey, was the squad's most treasured possession. As far as Mitchell was concerned, it was more important than any of the detectives. He leaned against Jacob's desk, one of 4 desks in the room. The Glenmore Park Police Department had 4 detectives and a captain. They'd once had a lieutenant as well, but due to budget problems, the chief had decided they could do without, a decision that still inspired controversy and criticism. "Once you're done writing the report, send it over to me and I'll submit it to the system," Mitchell said. Jacob sent him a look overcome with gratitude. His relationship with the department's internal report program was fraught with distrust and downright hatred. He sometimes reminded Mitchell of his mother, who called him regularly with complaints like, "The internet won't play the song I clicked on the desktop," or "I wrote an email, but then the computer made it disappear, and now I can't find my pictures." Mitchell crossed the room to one of the whiteboards. The room had two of them, used for brainstorm sessions or to collect info on major cases. Both were currently covered with doodles, mostly of ducks. He erased.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?